India is a young country. Focus, we are told over and over again, is on its top quality education and the best possible employment. While, of course, there are all those reports that say millions more jobs will be created every year. In fact, we're adding anywhere between 3 to 5 million jobs per year, and the number we're told is only going to go up. But what about the quality of employable students? Who's looking at that? Who's taking it very seriously? And how can we ensure that India's young are going to play a very key role on the global stage from here on, not just restricted to India? That's what we're looking at, and a very special panel with me, Vivek Madhukar, Chief Operating Officer, timesjobs.com. Also with me, Anup Jindal, CEO, RMSI here in Delhi. Joining us from Bangalore, Binod HR, Executive Vice President, Global Head, Talent and Technology Operations, Infosys. And with him, Deepak Mehrotra, Managing Director, Pearson, India. Thanks all so much for taking out time to join us this morning. Mr. Binod, sir, if I could start by asking you, I'm sure that Infosys, you're sort of flooded with people who want to join the business. But surprisingly, the IT sector is one that's been looked at very closely at the kind of people queuing up for jobs who are outside perhaps your door, and how vast numbers of them don't really make the cut. How do you see this scenario, sir?
Yeah, in the urgency of creating more talent in the country, the number of engineering institutions were doubled over the last 10 years. Moving from almost 1,500 to 3,500. So what really we missed the point at that point of time is to see how we need to increase the quality of education. Quantity is covered, but the quality is missing.
Right.
You know, the best and the brightest go for good jobs, and very few people go into teaching. So that is where the problem is.
Right, and that, of course, is a very serious problem, sir. When you sort of ask a group of youngsters what they want to do, just nobody's hands ever go up to say that they want to teach. But Mr. Mehrotra, as someone who's sort of been looking at these trends closely, who's been trying to figure out just what the youth want, where they are headed. Of course, some of the surveys that we've seen are just dismal. Anywhere between 25 to say 40% of our graduates, they say, are employable. Over the last couple of years, sir, some say the scenario has worsened. Others, of course, say that it's slightly better. How have you sort of managed to gauge the situation?
Every year around the time of the Teachers' Day, we run a survey and take feedback from teachers, which are the biggest stakeholders in the entire teaching learning process that goes on in the classroom, both at the school as well as the higher education institutions. We released the survey findings for 2015, which was the third edition. And very interestingly, 64% of the higher education institutions are saying that you have a challenge on the employability of the graduates coming out of the system. That's the teachers talking about it. And the first time, this teaching community is coming back and saying, listen, we would like to prepare employable graduates, but can you connect us to the industry? There is so much changing in the industrial world at such fast pace. The half-life of knowledge is going down by the minute. What we are giving knowledge, we are not working towards application. They are also saying very strongly, what you measure is what you get.
That's a very valid point.
Across.
That's a very valid point, sir. When you're saying that those teachers coming back to you and saying, connect us with industry. Let's figure out what industry want. What are the job requirements? Mr. Madhukar, is that sort of been experiences as well? That, you know, we sort of historically, our education's limited us to classrooms, a lot of classroom learnings. We've been sort of accused of only focusing on rote learning and all of that. And is this the price that we are paying? And sort of, do you see a course correction happening now?
Yeah, I guess a course correction is essential in this area. But basically, if you look at it as two separate parts, you know, one is what the professional who's learning is going to be ready with. The other part is how do you get these teachers or the educators, you know, aligned to the industry themselves. So it's like you mentioned, you know, teaching is not the most attractive career for most of the professionals right now. And it's not that a lot of people from the industry are going into teaching. And I think that's the large part which will have to be bridged to make a quick impact. Because you can't really move all the people who are studying into the industries to understand the industry. But you could actually get these teachers to understand the industry much better so that they could, you know, besides just the rote learning or knowledge skills, they could actually impart, you know, application or even behavioral skills in the college. And I think that's going to be a very important part over the next 5 years or so.
Right. You know, sir, we've been looking at all of this, Mr. Jindal, so closely. This is not the first time that we are speaking of, the need to get out there. The Prime Minister goes to Germany and says, look at the way Germany is teaching its young. And the German system is basically 3 days in the classroom, 2 days on the shop floor.
Right.
So get your hands dirty, get on the job training. More importantly, we're talking about skills. You've got this national program, but big and sort of serious questions on how much of implementation on the ground actually happens.
No, I think this is all a very good step in the right direction, because now there is a whole national debate, and this has come to the forefront of how important it is to reskill and focus on skill development at all levels, not just at the entry level, the college, but even at the people who are at a very low skill level, who are working in the unorganized sector. If you see in India, right from class 1 to 12, or you can complete your whole graduation without ever really making an effective presentation.
Right, exactly.
Okay?
Right.
Then there's a whole emphasis on rote learning and pattern recognition, rather than learning through experience, learning through, curiosity, all of that. So these things are making an impact when these people graduate, and we find these are significant gaps in the employability.
Right.
While as an industry, we can bring them in, we can train them on our specific needs, but there's a limit to that. If I do that too much, then I'm also fundamentally altering the true education which these people need. Right?
Okay. That's an important point. I'll get Mr. Binod there to respond. So would you agree to that? Because there's one view is that the slogan is scale, skill, speed, and one view is that to meet it, corporates must really take the lead. They must drive it, because at the end of the day, corporates are skilling for themselves. So why not do more? What would you say, sir?
Absolutely. Corporates can do two things. One is to complain or to do something about it. I think it's important for corporates to do something about it.
Right.
So important thing is to look at the relevance of the curriculum. Look at what we are teaching the students. So what I'm saying is we should make the curriculum more relevant and apt for what is required in the market.
You know, Mr. Mehrotra, you raised that important point earlier of the kind of engagement that teachers should really have with industry, have with corporates. And that's sort of the same kind of example that Mr. Binod is talking about, that we need to sort of go back. We seem to be caught in this kind of a vicious cycle. Who's going to take the lead? Are the corporates going to decide, or sort of are the corporates going to work closely with the education sector? Are the educationers going to step forward and say, no, you decide? How do you see us sort of breaking midway and sort of figuring out how we join hands? Because clearly we need both. We need to lead on education and employment if we are to change these numbers that we are looking at.
The choice that the corporates need to make is very simple. Are you going to repair and prepare, or are you going to train and prepare?
Yeah.
So the current system of education is throwing up people, which the corporates need to repair and prepare. You could actually then step back to say, can I ensure that the way the curriculum gets delivered, the way the teaching happens, the way the teachers are clued into the trends of the future, the way the assessments are run, because the current assessment frameworks across our education system, both schooling as well as the higher education, is asking the child, I would like to know, what do you know?
Right.
It needs to shift to say, I would like to know, what can you do with what you know?
Right.
And the moment you get there, you are actually imparting skills of a different nature, which are required for the kind of jobs that people will be doing 10 years from now. The jobs that will exist 10 years from now are not even yet created.
I agree with that. Isn't that true? That is a mindset issue. Skilling still, for vast numbers of India, just not aspirational. It's not cool. They don't want to do it.
It's not. So skilling or the vocational side has never been a very exciting thing from an attractiveness perspective for a candidate. It's gaining some steam, but really till there is a decent level of certification and acceptance of that certification in the industry, it's not going to move too fast. Coming back on the other side, where it's around the degree courses which are basically imparting knowledge. They're not imparting either application ability or neither are they improving the behavioral or the communication levels of a student. So there are again, there is one part which is around improving the application ability, which may be a tougher ask.
I see.
But really the bigger challenge that the corporates face at an entry level, in our surveys it's come that over 60 to 65% of the problem is around the behavioral side and the communication side of the ability of a student. Now there are two parts on it. One is structural, what you can do till class 1 to 12th, where you actually improve the communication and stuff. But really, even in the final year or in the last 2 years of education, if there is effort which goes into improving the communication level, so even at a basic level of training them how to handle an interview,
Right.
it could actually significantly help move candidates from not being employable
Right.
to at least partly employable.
Right. But you know, when we talk about communication, Mr. Binod, you know, we've seen what's been happening at some of the IITs, IIT Roorkee, for instance, a large section of students saying, no, there should not be, we shouldn't have classes only in English, for instance, because when we come from the parts of India that we come from, we're not equipped to understand what's happening in these classrooms. So there's clearly, again, the India that understands English as a language and the importance to know English as a language, and the other India, which is as aspirational and as sort of keen to get into the IITs for the best opportunities, or sort of our other top institutions, why just IITs, and then feels that the lack of English is holding them back.
The most important skill, or I would say the most important strength India has, is all of us, as when we are in different regions, pick up minimum 3 languages. We, the mother tongue, the regional language, English, Hindi, you know, we pick up many languages like this, and we are adapted to this kind of a situation. So this is a great strength that we have, and we are not leveraging that strength to a greatest extent. Now, where are the jobs available, and whom are we trying to address? You look at the IT or ITES industry, most of it is in the West. You know, almost 60-62% of our business comes from the US, and about 25% from UK and Europe. Now, this is the addressable market space, and we need to have the skills to address this particular market space. English is a very, very important component for us to communicate.
Fair enough,
and
right.
it is that skill that we should go behind. We should train people more in English, because if we are going to make sure that people are only trained in the regional language, they will just remain within the state. They cannot even look for jobs outside their state.
Right.
It is important for us to be international, because that is where the jobs are. And once we get there, there's a lot more things, a lot more development that will happen around it.
Right. If I may ask you, Mr. Mehrotra, are these the kind of skills that we can actually teach someone, or sort of is it you have it or you don't have it? I mean, either you have the ability to learn to stay ahead of the curve, or you don't have it.
You know, you need to start at an early stage. The school system, and if you notice what everybody talks about, a whole child development, it talks about, and that's what all frameworks that you talk about emphasize on, a whole child development and acquiring, you know, life skills, or loosely stated 21st century skills. The entire education system is fairly clear. You are preparing people for jobs, for employment, which is not going to be there beyond a point. So learnability, literacy, numeracy, softer skills are extremely important for you to stay relevant into the future.